Hey class, hopefully you're doing well, staying safe out there. This is your first time doing a weekly drawing, and this is a pretty basic, simple drawing to work with. It's by Picasso, and it's actually a person he knew, Igor Stravinsky, and it was done in 1920. It's ink on paper, so I think it's a good drawing to start with because it's just a basic line drawing. Probably a lot of you have heard of Picasso, one of the fathers of modern art. And he was classically trained to do work, but he ended up doing a lot of different styles of art that weren't, as we say, realistic. And this is kind of in one of those things early on in a vein where he's not trying to be totally realistic, but we get a feeling of the person as much as a likeness isn't totally there. Things are exaggerated, and he's not concerned with things being perfectly proportional, the right shape and size compared to each other, like the hands being way larger than they should be in relationship to the head. So we get a feeling of something, a sort of person without actually realistic rendering. The hands being, like I said, really big, the head, the eyes spacing being off, how big this far glasses lens is compared to the close one. It should be smaller as it goes further away. But it has a line quality to it, the way the line is made, that's very compelling. And some of the shapes are just alluded to by open line areas, and there's solid shapes. The design is almost taking up the whole thing, and it bleeds to the edge in some spots, and there's not a lot of space around the head. There's these big negative spaces here, but not much above the head. So it's kind of compressed, and it feels like we're close to his legs, and he's getting smaller as he goes up, which he's getting way smaller than he should be. So it has sort of a compression and feeling of the guy. Maybe gives us a sense of his character as well as creative. I'm going to read you a quote from Stravinsky. He said, "From Naples I went back to Rome, where I had a delightful week with Lord Berners. I shall never forget the adventure which later befell me in crossing the frontier on my return to Switzerland. I was taking my portrait, which Picasso had just drawn at Rome and given to me. When the military authorities examined my luggage, they found this drawing, and nothing in the world would induce them to let it pass. They asked me what it represented, and when I told them that it was my portrait, drawn by a distinguished artist, they utterly refused to believe me. 'It is not a portrait, but a plan,' they said. 'Yes, the plan of my face, but of nothing else,' I replied. But all my efforts failed to convince them, and I had to send the portrait in Lord Berners' name to the British ambassador in Rome, who later forwarded it to Paris in the diplomatic bag. The altercation made me miss my connection, and I had to stay till the next day." This is from Igor Stravinsky's Chronicle of My Life. So back in 1920, this is kind of crazy to us now, but we have a situation where these military officials didn't believe this was actually a portrait because the style of art at that time, this was really not like it, and they thought somehow this was a secret plan that was being transported. um, I read that to kind of give you guys a feeling of how much art's changed in the last 100 years ago this was made, and that this nowadays wouldn't even be considered that weird by modern standards of abstraction and changing things. And so I want you to think about that as we go along, how art changes, what we do accept as art and what we accepted as art back in other eras and now. That's an interesting thing to think about. But as you draw this, start anywhere you wish and begin to think about the line quality, how he creates value through thicker lines in some spots. Pay attention to that, and thinner lines, how he draws your eye around the piece. There's sort of focal points throughout the piece. One thing that always strikes me is this far glasses lens, because it's bigger. It should be bigger here and smaller as it goes away in space, but it's bigger. It really draws my attention to this eye, and actually the eye is bigger too, because in glasses, um, some people's glasses, like when I've drawn my own self-portrait, I wear glasses. the lens actually makes the eye a little bigger than it should be, and he actually picked up that detail. So this becomes the focal point, and our eye moves, and the kind of sinuous quality of the lines, and the hands being big and at the center keep a lot of attention, the way he added dots here. So he draws our eye around a lot. For such a simple drawing, it's doing a lot of things that are pretty interesting. So I want you guys to, while you're drawing, to think about what's happening in the works that you're looking at, and how are they working? Why are they working? Maybe they're not for you, and you think, oh, these are terrible. I hate this. What do I mean by working? I mean by how the drawing or painting is accomplishing its intentions. So what is it using? This is just purely an element of line, right? It's very simple. It's black and white. It's on paper and ink. So it has a very simple number of medium choices, one medium on paper and black and white. And he could add grays by doing hatching, but he didn't really choose to do that. He added all line work of, hatching would be line work as well, but he didn't choose to build up value very much, except for where he added thicker lines. So he used the thickness and thinness of line to add value. So these are the type of things I want you to notice when you're doing it. So from the instructions in the daily drawing there, it tells you what you're doing. You're build up the big shapes, the blocking out the shapes first, like here's a big shape, here's big shapes, then add the details. Don't do any shading. This doesn't have shading anyway. Some of the later ones do have some shade in them until you kind of block it out. And then try to do as much as you can in an hour. This one you should be able to pretty much accomplish the whole drawing, or at least a version of it. Some of the later ones get more detailed, but spend a whole hour looking at it, studying it, investigating it, thinking about how it's working. And then that'll be it. And you'll turn it in the assignment weekly drawing number 1. So that'll complete that for you. And every time you do one of these, it's 10 points. It's a really good practice to look at art and to think about how it's working and design to learn from things in the past. All right, so take care and happy drawing.